Hello, this is Miss Schiller, and I'm going to read Chapter 10 of Fallen Angels by Walter Dean Meyer, and that starts on page 121. It was a platoon thing, but not really a full platoon thing. Our squad was cool, but the other squads were all cut down to 4 or 5 men. It was a platoon on paper, but it was just paper, not men. We mounted the choppers an hour before nightfall. We were at the landing zone a little over 10 minutes. Sergeant Simpson laid out a new route to the hamlet. We cut through some dense underbrush for half an hour before we got near the hamlet. Sergeant Simpson laid out the ambush. It was simple enough. We were on one side of the small cemetery. The reports had it that the VC came past the cemetery into the hamlet at night. They terrorized the people in the hamlet, taking what they called a tax and killing anybody they thought might have been informing on them. We were supposed to surprise them to make them pay for coming to the hamlet. Monaco, as usual, was point. He was about 40 meters beyond the cemetery. The way we figured, they had to pass him to get to the cemetery. We had claymore mines at the end of the cemetery, and then the rest of the platoon stretched out in a straight line along what we had been told was the path the VC took. Johnson and Brew would be at the end of the line we formed. We moved in quietly with Sergeant Simpson placing each of us and making sure that we knew where the others were. Try not to kill each other if you can help it, he said. We dug in. I had 5 sandbags, which I filled and put in front of me. Suddenly, they weren't big enough or solid enough. I wanted something else, a wall maybe. I could rest my piece on the sandbags, but it didn't look very convincing. Silence. There wasn't to be any communication between us in case the VC had lookouts. Suppose, I thought, they had spotted us already. The only radio we had, a PRC-10, or Prick 10 as they called it, was near Lieutenant Carroll. Brew had it. I didn't want the radio. The antenna made you stick out like a sore thumb and drew a lot of fire. It was dark. There were bugs. Somewhere in the distance I heard frogs. The night was filled with noises. After a while it dawned on me that I couldn't see anything. There was a moon above us, but it didn't give us enough light. I wanted each VC to have his own light shining right on him. It was 22:30 hours. Back home in Harlem, it would have been about 10:30. The 8 o'clock parties would be just hotting up. Kenny would be fighting with Mama about going to bed. Maybe he would wonder about what I was doing. If he was in bed already, he would be reading comics under the blankets with a flashlight. I wondered if he would feel anything if I got nailed. Would he wake up in the middle of the night, wondering what was wrong? Would he feel uneasy, knowing that halfway around the world his brother was hurting? Kenny, I love you. We waited. I told myself that I was bored. I wondered if Mama was getting the allotment checks. I wondered how she felt about them. Did she think I was doing something for her or just that I was part of my being in the Army? I didn't know myself. At 2300 hours, I had to pee. Actually, I had to do more than that, but no way was I taking my pants down in the boonies. I felt around me to see if I was on an incline, decided I wasn't, and lay on one side and peed as quietly as I could. It was grave dark and quiet except for the things that crawled in the night. Suppose everyone else was gone. Suppose I was here by myself. Forget that. Think about something else. Think about Diana Ross waking me up in the morning, begging me not to get out of bed. No, wait. Her and Juliet Prowse were secretly sisters trying to get me to make love to them. The thing was, I was a virgin. I didn't tell anybody because I wasn't supposed to be a virgin. I was supposed to be hip. Everybody knew how blacks were, how soldiers were. Everybody knew, and I was still lying in behind a few inches of sand halfway around the world from anything I knew without having loved anything deeply or spent time with anyone in a bed alone. Maybe it wasn't important. Insects chirped, moved through the night. There were shadows all around me, laughing, jerking, mocking. A sound. I raised my head slightly to hear better. Voices, Vietnamese voices. I brought my hand to the weapon. My finger played with the safety. Shadows ahead of me. They were coming out of the cemetery. They moved about, talking quietly, calm, sing-song rhythms. What were they talking about? The lousy chow they got in the Army? Their families? Someone opened up, a scream. We were all firing. It was too dark to aim. I just fired in what I thought was the right direction. They began to answer fire. I could see faces over the light from the muzzle blasts. I fired faster, trying to space my rounds in a sector. I heard a bullet whine past me and flinched even though I knew it was already gone. A grenade went off, and then another. I kept firing. I didn't know where my rounds were even going. "Cease fire!" Simpson's voice. "Take cover, Lieutenant Carroll." A small pop, and a flare went high into the air. A moment later, the entire area was lit up. There was nothing in front of us. I looked from side to side, then I saw a body, and another. Thin arms, not much different color than mine. A hand waving slowly in the air, the night air, trying to push away the death already there. One body lay face down. There was a tremendous wound on the back. That's what a blast from an M16 can do. We kept shooting at the bodies, even though they were already dead. "Get another flare up," Sergeant Simpson's voice cracked as he spoke. Brunner sent another flare into the air as the rest of us searched the area with our eyes not moving from the spot we were in. "What the F happened?" Monaco thought came through the trees. "They passed by you?" "No. Here." Pee-wee called us over and we went. He had found one of them lying a few feet from the entrance of a tunnel. The tunnel was near the corner of the cemetery, covered by a low, sprawling bush. Sergeant Simpson took a grenade, pulled the pin, and threw it into the opening as hard as he could. We stepped back, and a moment later the grenade went off. "Okay, let's hit it," he said. We were starting off, backing out of the village towards the pickup zone. I felt sick. My stomach churned. I looked for Pee-wee and found him. There was nothing to read in his face. A pop, nothing more, a small pop, almost lost in the sound of the jungle around us. We hit the dirt, the mud. We returned fire. Someone sent a flare that was defective. It burnt for a second, then went out quickly. To my left, I heard someone crying out, not loudly. There was no panic, but a gentle cry of surprise. I turned just as the last of the light from the flare was dying. It was Lieutenant Carroll. The squad lit up the woods with fire as Sergeant Simpson barked into the radio. We started making our way toward the village. Johnson and Wallowit carried Lieutenant Carroll. Carried him. He was limp. His legs dragged behind him. God have mercy. God have mercy. I looked towards his face, but he was a silhouette lost in the darkness of the moment. Pain. I thought my heart was stopping. I couldn't breathe. We went to the edge of the village, and somebody shot off another flare. "Keep your heads down," Sergeant Simpson pointed towards the village. Pee-wee sent a burst of fire into the village. Johnson had put Lieutenant Carroll down and was setting up the M60. The 60, the pig, was hungry, angry that they had hit our man, our leader. "Cover the trail," Simpson called to Johnson. Pee-wee and Monaco kept pumping rounds high into the village while Johnson sprayed the trail behind us. We didn't see anything. The fire could have come from the village. Lieutenant Carroll, lying behind a wide tree, was a dark silhouette. No one in the squad spoke. We were afraid for Lieutenant Carroll. We were afraid for ourselves, for our only answer to the fear that called each of our names was to fire blindly into the fearful darkness. It took the chopper another 5 minutes to get to us. What we hadn't done to the village, it did. It leveled the huts. There were Vietnamese, mostly women and old men, running for their lives. Few of them made it more than a few feet as the chopper guns swept everything in their path. These were the people we had come to save, to pacify. Now it was ourself that we were saying, "God have mercy. God give us peace." The chopper came down, and we handed up Lieutenant Carroll, a burnt offering. We didn't hand him up gently through the chopper doors. We pushed him as hard as we could. It was his life, but it was our lives as well. God have mercy. We all climbed down, and the choppers tilted, jerked, and was off. The door gunner kept spraying the village as we moved off into the night. A medic on the chopper looked for Lieutenant Carroll's wound, but couldn't find it. Bars of light passed through us. They were eyes, the outlines of helmets. There was Lieutenant Carroll, unconscious. "Anybody see where he was hit?" The medic was already putting in the IV. We hadn't seen. There weren't any signs of blood. "Maybe he just passed out," Monaco said. The medic didn't answer. He just shook his head. We didn't land at the base. We went to Chu Lai. The whole squad made the trip. We got there in what seemed a short time. An ambulance was waiting for us. They took Lieutenant Carroll, and the rest of us went to one side and sat outside of a building. I was trembling, and I couldn't stop. Pee-wee put his hand on mine and tried to calm it. I took deep breaths. A major came by, saw us sitting on the ground, and came over to us. "What are you men doing here?" he asked. "I don't know, sir," I heard Monaco say. "What unit you with?" Nobody answered. He looked at us and then said something about either him being in charge or maybe he asked who was in charge. I don't know. Nobody answered. He looked at us. Oh, I already read that. Sergeant Simpson got to his feet and talked to him. And then we were all headed over to a low building. It was a mess hall, and 2 cooks sitting listening to the radio got coffee for us. One of the medics who had been on the chopper came over, and we asked him how Lieutenant Carroll was doing. He said he didn't know, only that he was over in building A3. We finished the coffee and went over to see him. He got hit under the arm, a hawk-faced doctor was saying. That's why the medics couldn't find the wound, almost in the armpit. It wouldn't have done any good if they had found it, though. Minako knew the prayer. Lord, let us feel pity for Lieutenant Carroll and sorrow for ourselves and all the angel warriors that fall. Let us fear death, but not let it live within us. Protect us, O Lord, and be merciful unto us. Amen. So Lieutenant Carroll died. Okay. That's the end of the chapter, page 128. I hope you enjoyed it.